Dober dan. So I'm acting here as a bit like a URBACT agent because I will show you some examples from Hungary. Many of them are supported recently by the URBACT project, not exclusively, but very often URBACT brings some innovation to cities, like in Hungary. So I have two hats here. One of them is the nature-based solution hub in Hungary. It's a non-profit mission from our side. We are a consultancy based in Budapest and the Netherlands. But we applied 2 years ago for acting as a nature-based solution hub, simply because we believe in this mission. And of course, we would like to develop more projects under nature-based solutions. But I'm also an URBACT expert, and my network is this one, biodiversity. Community-based approaches to foster urban biodiversity and nature-based solutions. And regarding the last question, I would like to mention that, for example, we are organizing BioBlitz. Do you know BioBlitz? If Google it, I don't have time, I guess, to explain. It's very sexy, let's say. And also we have urban tree festivals, to be honest, stolen from London. So you can find it on the internet, London Tree Festival. Very cool stuff, to be honest. And I also feel myself honored because in the last 10 years, I transferred 2 good practices from Ljubljana. One of them is the urban beekeeping to Budapest. And the other one, I just wrote an article about the busy bus, you know, when a group of children go to the school on foot or by bicycle. Unfortunately, Hungarian people were not so open to that, but we have some progress. As for the nature-based solution hubs, so it's a project organized or initiated by the International Union for Nature Conservation and also ICLEI. ICLEI is the global network of sustainable cities. And there are hubs formulating now in Europe, what you can see on the slide. And basically this is about dissemination and explanation of nature-based solutions for many policymakers and decision makers. So what we do is we try to draft articles explaining different topics, like in the previous great presentations. And also we try to organize meetings, experts, for example, landscape architects from the example from Spain. So those type of concepts and way of thinking with decision makers and urban planners. And you can find some more information on the website, Network Nature, that's the keyword. I promise that I will talk more about grasslands than trees. This is simply because, you know, my statement, perhaps first, is that if we would like to increase both the quality and the quantity of urban green spaces in the cities, we have to deal with cultural issues, because this is simply very much rooted in different norms and different beliefs we all have. And cities are also important because we can tackle this cultural issue very efficiently, because many more people live in cities and not in the countryside. So basically it's easier to talk about nature and ecosystem in the city because there's a huge audience than in a protected area somewhere in the countryside. For me, this one explains well this cultural shift we have to make. So what is beauty? Just explained the Spanish colleague. And also what is ecosystem and ecosystems. What happens in Hungary? Some progress, but a lot of challenges, to be honest. So for example, we have our own biogeographical region in the Carpathian Basin, which is a big issue, and we have a lot of endemic species. So we should be proud of it. And actually, a lot of people knows in Hungary, and they are proud of the puszta, you know, the steppe, basically. But this is a cultural issue, and people don't know that actually the highest rate of biodiversity in Hungary, in the habitats we have in Hungary, it's basically the steppe, the different grasslands of the steppe. So this should be a natural proud. This is a big issue, to be very honest. But on the other hand, unfortunately, people don't understand this. And this picture was taken in May when we had the elections, and the mayor of Budapest, who is a big fan of greening issues, and actually the greening practices was awarded by the URBACT right now as a good practice. But one of the candidates from the central government party wore this special equipment against chemical hazard to cut the grass, because she simply didn't understand that how nature works and how ecosystem works, and a grassland needs a few years' time to be full with native species, which is also reducing the harmful species. So unfortunately, in many places, this is the situation. So in this picture, you can see a wilderness from the Carpathian Mountains, and also a picture, from an original, what is a forest for us, with beech forest. And I finished the university as a geographical student. I learned geography. And basically, after the university, I realized that the forest, what I think it's forest, is just a plantation and not a wilderness and not a real forest. So we are also, myself, are really far away of the understanding how ecosystem works. So this is just a very short definition of nature-based solutions. Actually, the ecosystem we invite to have ecosystems as allies against the climate change. And it's a nice way also to promote at the same time to have ecosystems as weapons in our hands to combat the climate change, and also to have climate change adaptation, but also to increase biodiversity. So nothing new, basically. So you heard that nature-based solutions are new. Indeed, it's a new concept, but national parks and nature environmentalists do nature-based solutions for decades now. So if you go to a national park, you can see, for example, in Hungary, wetlands created 40, 50 years ago in order to increase biodiversity. But now we also emphasize the other side of the coin. So not only biodiversity is important, it's super important, of course, but it's also the part of the story now that wetlands, for example, are huge carbon sinks, sometimes better than forest. And I promised to talk about grasslands, and this is also another point for grasslands. So nature-based solutions have, you can see some numbers on the screen. If you open different strategies and policies on European level, you can find nature-based solutions basically everywhere. The most important, as for urban issues, the most important one was also mentioned in the previous speakers, that the biodiversity strategy and the nature restoration law states that member states shall ensure that there is no net loss in the total national area of urban green space and the urban tree canopy cover in urban ecosystem areas. This is something very important as a framework. Okay, so this is the beautiful picture. I like it very much because we often have the criticisms that this type of biodiversity-driven methods can work in fancy places. This is definitely not a fancy place in Veszprém. Veszprém is a small town, 50,000 people, close to Lake Balaton. And in front of a house, what you can see on the street, on the picture, sorry, it's a prefabricated housing estate type of building built in the socialist era. And they had this climate adaptive grassland management also awarded by the URBACT program, by the way, as a good practice. And what I would like to highlight that, this place, what you can see on the screen, is a typical place explained by Jan Gehl, the famous Danish architecture and writer, as an unused public space or unused green space in this case. So people normally don't have picnic here, and they also have a lot of space to walk with the dogs. So this is an ideal place to try this climate adaptive grassland management, and they have it. And actually they have a very biodiverse urban wildflower meadow in the front of this type of houses. And many people in Hungary would say that no, it's not for me. It's full with bees, it's dangerous, and it's full with weeds as well, so it's not good. But what you can see on the screen, that they started a very systematic and clear communication. So they clearly make a differentiation between those places which are cut down and also places which is white flower meadow, saying that this is not neglected but only biodiverse, and also they have a lot of explanation and signage. And after a couple of years now, tenants really request this method from the municipality because it's simply beautiful, and they understand the importance of this method. By the way, this is cheaper. They say 20% more or less cheaper. Of course, biodiverse. In Budapest, we also have a kind of urban white flower strategy and policy. And there, one of the research institutes has a monitoring, and it's absolutely clear that it's more biodiverse also in terms of plants and animal insects and animal species. And last but not least is also very important because you mentioned trees and climate, but this type of urban green areas are also regulate very significantly the microclimate of the urban space they have. So that's Veszprém. The second part or the second practice I would like to highlight is basically a public park in Budapest. It's a new park. And then perhaps the most important message that how can we transform public parks for like Park 2.0 type of parks, which is basically biodiversity-driven park maintenance. So you have to know that on the other side of this picture is the river Danube, and this park is very long because it's on a dike. And before it was just a neglected urban area. And 2 years ago, 3 years ago now, they created a park, and which is very important. Public participation also worked very well. And now it's a big success everywhere. And actually it's awarded by many different organizations. So how to transform a public park for more biodiversity driven? I would like to highlight what was very visible on the Spanish slides as well, that in nature you can find mosaic landscape very often. And this park, what you can see is that this area is full with perennials. This one is an intensive grassland with watering. This one is a dry grassland with some seed mixture, and people use it as normally. So it's the same basically what I saw in the Spanish slides. I don't remember the name, so nature and urban nature together. Also, it's very important, of course, using perennials. Also, there are some critical questions whether we have fruit trees in public spaces. This is also a sensitive question because they make a lot of dirt on cars and on the street. But in this park, actually, they use orchards. And actually, it's very nice on the picture. Perhaps you can see that the fruit trees grow faster in the place where the grass is not cut down, like in the other side of the little path where the grass is often cut. So this is the park. So it's on basically a dike. So there is very serious restrictions on the dike because of the water management. So for example, it was not really possible to plant trees because of the prevention of the floods. So also they have a very nice policy here to support pollinators. They also use different special seed mix created specifically for this habitat. We also have shrubs in this park. This is also an opening debate in Hungary, whether we should use shrubs in public parks, because in the last decades we didn't really use them. But this park is basically not in the city center, but not in the outskirts, but somewhere in between. And shrubs are super important for many different species. But of course, in the city center, sometimes they don't provide enough safety for some people. So that's the question. It's not, this photo was not taken in that park, but in another place in Budapest. So it's also a nice way to increase biodiversity in a public park, also to raise awareness of people, to make a hedge made of the fallen branches. This is also an old technique, nothing new, but at least in public parks it's completely new, at least in Budapest and Hungary. Many cities, including Veszprém on the picture, but also in Budapest, we have a kind of policy now to use the dead wood on the land, so to leave the dead wood on the land, because it's well known that it's like a biodiversity hotspot. But with the explanation and clear communication, people often understand why is it important. Of course, this park, Pünkösdfürdő, which is the award-winning part in Budapest, it's actually starting from both sides of the line with high biodiversity, so with urban meadows, with orchards, with less infrastructure for recreation. But in the center, it's an, I would say, normal park, a lot of facilities for different recreation, but it's also a combination of urban nature and recreation. And this is also the place in Budapest, and actually, as far as I know, in Hungary, where the first rain garden was created 3 years ago. At that time, perhaps now it's 4 years ago, the owners of this park or the developers didn't find a landscape architect in Budapest who has the skills and knowledge how to make a rain garden. So they found a Hungarian lady living in the United States to work with them. Now we have a huge conference on rain gardens and a big debate how to use them, where to use them, what is concretely a rain garden, whether do we need a specific layers under the ground, or is just a hole which can capture some water. So it's also something new in Budapest. I know that it's not ethic to remove the leaves under a tree to another space, because you just crop the circle of the organic matter. But in public spaces, you have to do it in recreational areas. So in many parks in Budapest, they try to manage at least one part of the organic waste locally. And this is also a nice way to create hedgehog shelters, if you know, because they like to spend the winter in these places. Regarding Budapest, and not regarding that specific area, the park itself, yes, it's also, we have to face big questions. So for example, based on the projections, in 30 years, the climate around Budapest will be steppe. So the big question that what kind of trees we should plant, because the change will be very dramatic. What you can see now in Budapest in many places, that they try to help young trees growing with this method. We also have the Miyawaki forest method in 6 places in Budapest now. And of course, we have a lot of cooperation with nature conservation organizations like the BirdLife Hungary. So you can see and you can increase biodiversity very well by supporting birds and bats, which means also, for example, there is no construction work between the feeding periods. What you can see in Budapest, that they try to establish community composting in many places at the edge of public parks, because it somehow is also related to, using organic waste, what to do with the waste, composting, and living closer to the nature. We also have some experiments, not as deep as in Graz, to use modern, like the Stockholm tree plantation method, for example. I think the first tree was planted with this method 2 years ago, or perhaps 3 years ago. But we also have some other experiments. On the right-hand side, you can see an experiment in a street where they plant nursery trees from forestry nurseries, so very young trees, because together with the foundation of dendrologists, because they say that a very young tree can find their way in underground better between the different pipelines and infrastructure, and after 1 year they can grow better than pre-nursered trees. What we don't have in Budapest, beehives. This picture was taken in Ljubljana 10 years ago. So this is the method in Budapest we learned 10 years ago. What we don't have, it's sheep in the park, public parks. They wanted to have now sheep, but finally politicians said better not to have the sheep. This slide is about how Budapest started this urban policy regarding greening, and this was also already explained that what you have is really a good strategy for green infrastructure and blue infrastructure and interconnected green and blue infrastructure. So this was really the first step. And also a big question that we have in Budapest, a tree cadastre. So it's an ongoing process to have a data sheet of each tree online, and people can check it, what kind of status they have, whether they're old or young, what kind of species the specific tree is. And also they can calculate the benefit of the tree. I think this feature of the application is something very important, because it's about engagement. When people see that a tree costs, I don't know, 10 million Hungarian forints, because it's a major tree, because it's absorbing carbon dioxide and pollution and all these benefits, they think about trees in another way. Of course, change needs time. So what I witnessed in June in Budapest, that we have this country-wide competition for flowering cities. Perhaps you have in the same in Slovenia. And the organizers from Budapest wanted to have a criteria regarding biodiversity and sustainability, and there was a kind of revolution, because these issues are simply not really known in smaller towns in the countryside. And they say that it's a big thing to plant normal flowers here, like on the slide. So it's not easy to move forward towards sustainability. I have 2 more minutes perhaps. So it's the District 12 of Budapest, because I think it's something very important and not touched by previous speakers. So this district have some urban area, but also nice forest and protected areas. But the majority of the urban green area is basically private gardens. So what can a municipality do with private gardens? So that's a big issue. How to motivate or encourage people to use biodiversity more in the private gardens. So the story of this district started through transnational experience, building up a lot of different strategies from exchange and learning programs, like the BPathNet from Ljubljana. And they have different programs trying to encourage people to do a bit more sustainable methods. So for example, they offer a free tree chopping service. So it's free for people living in the district, but they don't transport the organic waste out, so they have to use it in the garden as a mulch. So that's based on a prescribing system. They also promote composting by giving free of charge composting boxes, but this is also linked to a kind of education, one day information day, when they try to explain how to compost correctly. They also support private owners to protect trees from different insects. I try to focus on the really green ones. Within a project, they try to disseminate water collection barrels in order to capture rainwater and use it in the gardens. They also have a lot of failure. So when something is about innovation, failure is a part of the story. So they started to invite residents to co-create pocket gardens. But to be honest, it was a failure, and some people were very active, but the whole project was finally closed because it was not good. They also have a community garden. They also, instead of giving flowers to the residents, which is a custom in Hungary, They try to promote native trees, so they give native trees for residents. It is also based on a subscription system, because many part of the district was previously an orchard, and also fruit trees are sometimes very good. They can resist the changing climate very well. And they have a lot of different educational programs, and perhaps I will close at this slide that as for engagement, one of the residents came up with the idea to have a kind of competition among the gardens in this district, but the competition is about not the best or the most beautiful flowers, but the most biodiverse garden is awarded. So this was really a bottom-up process, which is a big issue in Hungary, because we also a post-Soviet country, and we are not really good in this public engagement. And this is something very interesting and also very visible. And I have a lot of other slides, but I think I will. So thank you very much for your attention.